Hello everyone. Here's a video I've been wanting to make for a while. This is me ranking all of the Deltarune bosses for chapters 1 through 4. So, I'll just quickly explain the tiers. So, ultra tough, pretty straightforward. The fight's incredibly hard. Hardest of the hard in Deltarune. Sneaks up on you. These are fights that are seemingly easy or they seem fairly challenging. But there's certain moments that kind of sneak up on you, and you can find yourself losing to these bosses, even though, in the beginning it seemed like they were going to be a piece of cake. Then there's fairly challenging, which is pretty straightforward. There's a decent challenge there. Mildly challenging, just a weaker version of fairly challenging. Mildly challenging, you can beat the boss with not too much effort on your part. Mid, these are just bosses that are actually pretty easy. They're not free, but they're pretty easy. And easy, these bosses, they're pretty much free. You basically can't lose these fights. So, and we will not be going over the mics. And speaking of who, this video is sponsored by the mics. So shout out to them. It's not like I owe them any money or, there's no loan sharking going on. They just happen to sponsor this video out of the kindness of their hearts. But also, aside from that, I'm going to quickly mention my Kickstarter. It's got 11 days to go. It is a one-page tabletop game. A copy only cost $1. The goal is $100. Right now we're at $69. And so, if you are so inclined, I'd appreciate whatever support you can give. Every single dollar gets us closer to our goal. And so, shameless plug aside, I'm going to go ahead and start the video. So first, I'm going to start with Lancer on his bike. I'm going to put this at mildly challenging. This is the first boss battle of the game. It's mildly challenging. At this point, you don't have that much health. You're still learning the mechanics. So for a first boss, he's actually mildly challenging. But again, he's nothing compared to some of the other bosses we're going to get into. Next is this weird checker thing with the legs. I forget its name. But this one is going to go and sneaks up on you. This boss definitely has some attacks that, again, if you're not paying attention, or if your mind's wandering, or maybe if you're just underestimating the boss, there are a couple of attacks that can actually seriously sneak up on you, and you may die a couple times to this boss, especially your first time interacting with them. Also, the first time you fight this boss, Susie won't listen to the player. So you really are only working with Ralze and Chris. So because Susie's not listening, this automatically makes it harder than the second time you fight this boss. And I believe this boss is called Clover. Clover's another boss I would say actually sneaks up on you. When you fight Clover, again, you don't have Susie. And again, you are, relatively low in health. So I would say this is another boss that has a couple of attacks that can sneak up on you if you're not careful. Next up is Susie and Lancer when they team up. I'm going to put this one in... actually, I will put this one in Sneaks Up on You. This is another one that can actually sneak up on you if you're not careful. Obviously to, I guess, minor spoiler. But then again, this video is full of spoilers. But to beat this boss, you've got to put Susie to sleep and then kind of talk Lancer out of it. But you have to figure that out. And the time you're taking to figure it out is going to vary person to person. You might die by the time you figure it out. So this is a boss that can kind of sneak up on you. So this is Lancer when Susie fights him in the dungeon. This boss is literally free. It is literally free. You cannot lose this fight because once your health gets low enough, Lancer will stop attacking. So this is free. Super omega free. You cannot lose this. If you lost this fight, like truly lost it, that would be a miracle or a bug or a glitch. You cannot lose this fight. So it's super easy, super free. So there's this like checker thing. I'm going to put it in fairly challenging. So this time around, you actually have Susie helping you. And so that actually makes the fight easier. You also have acquired more healing items by the time you fight this creature a second time. So I'd say fairly challenging. Oh boy, we're coming to Jevil. This is probably going to be a hot take. But Jevil is... No, Jevil's definitely not easy. Jevil is ultra tough. All right, this might also be a hot take. I'm not sure. But hey, it's my tier list. I'm only going to put the king in fairly challenging. Um, See, my mind's been on King so much. King has his fans. I'll explain King, then I'll go into Jevil. Because Jevil's up here for a pretty specific reason. So, when it comes to King, the reason why King isn't fairly challenging is because King has a couple of very specific attacks that can definitely sneak up on you. But other than those one or two attacks, they're not really that hard to deal with. Also, each and every one of the characters, once you've talked to the king, you unlock like a new attack to deal with him. Like, for example, for Susie, I believe it's like Red Buster. So, these extra bonus moves or whatever, they make it a lot easier to deal with him. Maybe without them, but with them, I mean, he's really just not not that difficult in all honesty. Um, so anyway, so Jevil is an ultra tough for really one reason. Jevil is an ultra tough because in chapter 1, you do not have storage. Storage was introduced in chapter 2. So because you don't have storage until chapter 2, that greatly limits your items in your inventory. That alone is a huge buff to Jevil because for all future bosses, including the Roaring Knight, you at least have access to storage. So that is a huge boost to Jevil, and ultimately that's why Jevil is in Ultra Tough versus sneaks up on you. Now, like most Ultra Tough bosses, there is an item that you can have that kind of helps you out when dealing with Jevil. In Jevil's case, I forget what the item is called. It's not the spin cake. I think it's the top cake. So essentially, if you don't return that piece of cake, if you don't fix it and return it to Top Chef, if you keep that chunk of cake that is repaired, that will heal, I think, like 160 HP or something for the whole team. And you don't get access to the spin cake until, if I'm not mistaken, either the end of the chapter, or if you do get access to it in chapter 1, it's nowhere near as strong as the top cake, the spin cake I'm referring to. So if you keep the top cake, then again, this fight becomes easier. But you also lose access to the spin cake. That's kind of the catch. So, yeah, Jevil's a character who is in Ultra Tough more so because of the circumstances around Jevil. So, alright. These guys, they are going on the sneaks up on you. This is definitely a fight that, I mean, they come off as pretty goofy in the overworld, but when you fight them, this is definitely a fight that sneaks up on you. In my opinion, by design, really. So, yeah, you can definitely find yourself dying to this boss. Or you can find yourself in that really awkward position where the cutscene is going on and Chris is down. Everyone's dancing around while Chris is just down. It's very awkward. But also very funny, in all fairness. Alright, next up is Birdly. I would say for both of the Birdly fights, I'm going to put them on sneaks up on you. Actually, you know what? No, this first one is going to go on sneaks up on you because when you fight him here, you have all 3 of your party members. This might be overrating him a little bit, but I would actually put Birdly, when it's just you and Noelle, at the bottom of Ultra Tough. Because it's just you and Noelle, the fight is actually considerably more difficult, in my personal opinion. So, Birdly has a couple of, all of Birdly's attacks are pretty difficult. If I remember correctly also, during this fight, Birdly summons 2 enemies to join him, and that's just a pain. So, yeah, again, the bottom of Ultra Tough, but, I mean, hey, I gotta give him respect where respect is, due. Next up is just regular old Spamton. Regular old Spamton is going to go in fairly challenging. You may have like 1 or 2 attacks that are kind of tricky, but that's about it. It's nothing too bad. Again, he gets a much more powerful form that we'll get into in a second. Next up is Rules fight on the boat. This fight is mid. It's actually pretty easy. You might have some difficulty your first time around, but on replays it's going to be incredibly easy to beat him. This is actually a pretty, surprisingly easy fight. It's a creative fight. I like it, but it's also pretty easy. Next up is Spamton. Spamton Neo, that is. He is going in ultra tough. Yeah, this is definitely a tough fight. And actually, to order it, yeah, I'd put him in between here. I would say Jevil is actually a little bit harder, in my opinion. Again, probably a hot take, but yes, I mean, if you fought Spamton Neo, you already know why Spamton Neo was there. A very tough boss, just by design. I died quite a few times. Again, so as with most ultra tough bosses, if I'm not mistaken, you can, if you're playing on like PC, you can push like F1. There might be something for consoles too you can push. But there's a certain button you can push once, like F1 for help or whatever, and you get a certain amount of health when fighting Spamton Neo, but only like the first time. So again, like most ultra tough bosses, there's some sort of way to make them a little bit easier. But it doesn't change the fact that this boss is very hard. Next up is Queen. I'd put this boss in, actually probably the top of Sneaks Up on You. Again, this is a fight where there are specific attacks that, yeah, they can definitely sneak up on you if you're not careful, and if you don't, or alternatively, if you don't have enough healing items. And again, this can catch you off guard. You also, you have to figure out that, obviously, as she drinks her acid cup, her barrier goes down. But you have to figure that out. And so again, depending on how long it takes for you to figure that out, much like the Lancer Susie fight, you may end up dying by the time you figure it out. So, next up is Giga Queen. I'd actually say this is another fight that sneaks up on you. Again, it features some, punch-out S mechanics, and again, you've kind of got to figure them out, similar thing. So again, another boss that sneaks up on you. Again, you may find yourself dying a couple of times to this boss while trying to figure out how they work. And even when you figure it out, the boss still can be tricky at certain moments. So, another boss that sneaks up on you. Honestly, quite a few of them, more than I thought. Alright, next, the Weather Duo. I'd say the Weather Duo is, they're fairly challenging. There's definitely a decent challenge. Luckily, their fight doesn't last very long because they end up fighting with each other. Right? And so that kind of prematurely ends the battle. But this is definitely a fairly challenging battle. I would say definitely, pay attention and make sure you've got some good healing items. So yeah. Oh, the water cooler. Oh no. The thing of my nightmares. The water cooler. Definitely going in ultra tough. This boss is oh man. My first time finding this boss, I was just like, man, this is gonna be a piece of cake. It's a water cooler. Died very quickly. Very fast. Water cooler is by design a boss that sneaks up on you, but even once you've gotten familiar with water cooler's attack patterns and whatnot, it's still pretty difficult to deal with. So I would say the water cooler is actually harder than Bertley, but not quite as hard as either of these two bosses. Next up, we've got Rules again, but the Chapter 3 fight. I'd say this one's fairly challenging. Again, there's a decent challenge. You do have to figure out some of the gimmicks, but they're not too hard to figure out. And a lot of Rules attacks, they hit you a lot. They're surprisingly accurate. But they don't deal that much damage, luckily enough. So, unless you just didn't bring healing items, this fight will be fairly challenging, but it's nothing too bad. Tenna, who he might have the funnest fight in the game. That's kind of debatable with all the mini games. Some people hate him, some people love him. I personally liked him quite a bit. Where would I put Tenna? I'd put Tenna in fairly challenging, honestly. Again, if you have healing items and you're prepared, this fight's not too bad. Again, so the mini games, obviously in Chapter 3 you have to play several mini games, and so these return. So if you played those mini games for the first time, he'd definitely be up here. But because you get to play those mini games and practice them and whatnot, as the chapter progresses, by the time you get to this fight, you should be for the most part good to go. He does have a couple specific attacks, usually involving stars, that are pretty difficult to dodge and whatnot. But again, fairly challenging. If you take this boss seriously, you should do well. Oh. Oh, no. Another thing of my nightmares. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I was thinking about skipping the Roaring Knight for later, but we'll just go over the Roaring Knight right now. To no one's surprise, the Roaring Knight is going in Ultra Tough. And yes, the Roaring Knight is harder than Jevil. The Roaring Knight, again, like all Ultra Tough bosses, you can get the Shadow Mantle from Eram, which will make this fight easier. But even with it, it's still a pretty difficult fight. Intentionally. This isn't a fight that is intentionally incredibly difficult. I mean, let's be honest. Let's be real for a second, Most of us have spent hours trying to defeat the Roaring Knight. At least like 30, 45 minutes. That's most players. I know players that have rage quit. They just decided they can't beat the Roaring Knight. They're just gonna progress to Chapter 4 and just not worry about it. And so this is a tough boss by design. So I mean, there's not much to say. I mean, tough boss, likes to aura farm. All right, this boss. This boss, I'd actually say, is mid. Not easy, not free, but this boss is mid. Again, as long as you've got healing items, and as long as you just pay basic attention, then this fight really isn't all that difficult. Very entertaining, very funny. As far as entertainment value, probably one of the most entertaining fights in Deltarune. But as far as challenge goes, I mean, it's not free, but it's also not very hard. Gerson. He's a turtle, so he has to be free, right? No, he's definitely definitely an Ultra Tough. Definitely above Birdly. I actually would say above the Water Cooler. And I actually would say above. Yeah, you know what? No, he's pretty up there in my personal opinion. So Gerson, the main reason why Gerson is up here, there's two reasons why Gerson's so high. So the first reason is Gerson's fight it's a gimmick fight. I mean, obviously there's plenty of gimmicks in Deltarune, but there's the gimmick where you have to use a spear or hammer or axe, whatever, and sort of defend against bullets instead of the traditional moving around bullet hell style that you normally play through. You play with the green heart. So you have to get used to that gimmick because it mixes it up. Normally there's 4 directions like an Undertale. In Deltarune there's 8 directions. So you're going to have to probably die a couple of times just to figure out how that works. On top of that, there's the other gimmick where you have to reflect the turtle shells. And some of them you have to reflect multiple times, and others you don't. And you've got to figure that out. You will probably have to die figuring that out a couple of times. And even once you figure it out, it's still just a very difficult boss fight in general. So, but the second reason why is because if I am not mistaken, Gerson is one of only 2 Ultra Tough fights where there is no item you can use to really make the fight easier. It's just a difficult fight. There is no Shadow Mantle, there is no Top Cake, there is no F1. You just have to suck it up and deal with it. So that, I mean, between those 2 reasons, Gerson ranks pretty high on Ultra Tough. Definitely a tough boss. Well, we've only got 3 left. I'm going to go with the Titan. The Titan actually would put and sneaks up on you. The Titan is pretty difficult. The Titan, actually, even though the Titan's not Ultra Tough, if you have the, I forget what it's called, but it's the Shard of the Black Knife, the Roaring Knight's weapon. If you have that shard, it deals extra damage to the Titan and makes this fight a lot easier. So even though the Titan's not Ultra Tough, they still have a weapon that, makes them considerably easier to beat. Fun fact, when I fought the Titan, I forgot to equip that shard of the Black Knight, or sorry, the Roaring Knight. I forgot to equip it. And I didn't even notice that I forgot to equip it. I didn't die. I just kind of went through with the fight. So, I mean, again, there are definitely specific attacks from the Titan that can sneak up on you. But all in all, it's actually, compared to these guys, not too bad. Now, if I had to order this list down here, I would definitely say probably right here, honestly. Probably right here. Very close to ultra tough, but again, honestly, not too bad. Reorganize this a little bit. All right, going back down. All right, again, I forget this NPC's name, but this is actually another fight that sneaks up on you. This would actually go on ultra tough if it were a longer fight. The fight's not very long, but if the fight were longer, I would actually put this in ultra tough. This is a pretty tough enemy. They have one particular gimmick. Well, they have a couple of gimmicks that are difficult, but one particular gimmick where they take a picture and they spin the bullets around while other bullets come, at the player. It's, at least for me, pretty difficult to deal with. Even once you know the patterns, it's still pretty difficult. So, if you don't have the healing items and you aren't at a certain amount of health when you fight this boss, you definitely could die. This boss definitely sneaks up on you. And then last, Eram. The easiest and the freest boss in the game. Man, Eram is so easy. I mean, I literally beat this boss in my sleep, I mean, how could you lose to this boss? All right, that's enough trolling. I'm done messing around. This is the hardest boss. Move over, Roaring Knight. This is the hardest boss in Deltarune, bar none. This is the hardest boss. Like Gerson, there is no item to make this fight easier. The only way you make this fight easier is by losing, dying, and then every time you die, the fight becomes a little bit easier. But you have to lose, and I mean, if you're a winner, you want to win. You don't want to lose. So if you're okay with losing, sure, but I mean, by definition, that makes this boss tough. If you have to lose to make the fight easier, then yeah. Even still, Eram, when you've never died, is by far the toughest boss. Incredibly, incredibly tough. You are playing in sort of a Zelda-esque style. The weapon you use has limited range. Your speed isn't very fast. Compared to the traditional Deltarune playing, when you're playing as the heart, where you're pretty fast. You can move in all directions and kind of weave your way around projectiles. You can't do that when you're playing the video game segments. So your movement is nerfed. Your attack range is nerfed because of the sword. You cannot use healing items during the Eram fight. Yeah, it's only Chris, Susie, and Ralsei. Nobody else is there to help Chris, so it's just Chris. So this fight, I don't know if it was intentional, but it's by far the hardest fight in Deltarune. Easy. Roaring Knight is a roaring fraud. You've got nothing on Eram. Yeah, I died so many times to Eram. Even after I died so many times and candies were respawning and whatnot, I still died some more. I mean, this boss. Again, the first time you fight this boss, by far the hardest boss in Deltarune. And they get a little bit easier each and every time. But still, it doesn't change the fact that, honestly, Eram is so good. I want to give Eram their own tier. I really did. I wanted to make an Eram tier. But the mics wouldn't let me because I owe them money. So, yeah. Anyways. All right, so, I mean, that's pretty much it for this this boss tier list. I've ranked them all. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I'm sure you probably have your disagreements, which is fair. Feel free to leave them in the comment. If you liked the video, enjoyed it, or even just were mildly entertained, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. And once again, I'll just briefly mention, I do have a Kickstarter, so if you feel like supporting that, even just a single dollar helps. I really appreciate it. And last but not least, once again, this video was sponsored by the mics. Please buy Deltarune, please, for my sake. I owe them a lot of money. Sponsored by the mics. And that being said, that is the end of this video. I hope you have a great day, have a great life, and most importantly, stay safe, and don't loan money from three darkners. Not to discriminate, but man, they can be loan sharks. All right, bye-bye.